34 million. That is the number of biomedical abstracts just sitting in PubMed right now.
It's staggering.
I mean, if you tried to read one every single minute, no sleep, no food, it would take you over 60 years.
And the thing is, you'd be further behind when you finish than when you started. It creates this sensation of just, drowning in information.
Which is a huge bottleneck, right? Because somewhere in that pile, there could be a paper from, say, 1985 about a gene.
And another one from last week about a new drug compound.
Exactly. And if you put them together, you might cure disease. But no one connects them because it's physically impossible.
The knowledge is there. It's just fragmented. It's sitting in two different PDFs that have never, been in the same room.
So that's the mission for this deep dive. How do we fix that? And we're not talking about just summarizing articles with ChatGPT. That's child's play.
Right. We're looking at 3 breakthroughs that are trying to structure, derive, and actually reason with all this knowledge. It's a shift from just statistical prediction to what you could call structured reasoning.
Okay, so what's the lineup?
First, we're going to talk about iKraph, which turns all that text into a navigable map. Then SciencePedia, which tries to uncover the, quote, dark matter of logic.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
And finally, the Hierarchical Reasoning Model, or HRM. This is a tiny AI that's beating the giants by mimicking the brain's slow thinking.
Okay, that's the one I'm excited about. The tiny model beating the giant. But let's start with the map, iKraph.
So this comes from a team in Silicon. They took those 34 million abstracts and built a knowledge graph.
And graph is one of those buzzwords, What does that actually look like in practice?
Think of it like a massive spider web. To a normal AI, a sentence is just a string of words. But iKraph breaks it down. It found 10 million entities, drugs, genes, diseases, and then mapped 30 million relationships between them.
So instead of just reading aspirin reduces pain, it actually codes a digital link. Aspirin negatively regulates pain.
Precisely. And this isn't some hobby project. The team won a challenge organized by the NIH, which, is a huge validation.
Okay, so the map is accurate, but a map isn't useful unless you know how to read it. That's where this probabilistic semantic reasoning comes in, PSR.
Right. PSR is the engine.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because probabilistic semantic reasoning sounds like something you say to win at Scrabble. How does it find a new drug?
It's all about finding the invisible path. So let's say a paper from 1990 says drug X activates gene Y.
Okay.
Then 10 years later, another paper says gene Y suppresses tumor Z. A human might miss that connection, but the PSR algorithm sees the bridge. It infers that drug X might suppress tumor Z, even if no single paper ever said that.
It's like transitive logic, A equals B, B equals C, so A equals C.
Basically, yes. But biology is messy, so it has to account for that.
Right. So how does it stop from just making things up?
That's the probabilistic part. It looks for the weight of evidence. If that link shows up in 50 different studies, the probability score shoots way up. If it's just in one obscure paper, the score stays low. It filters out the noise.
And they actually proved this works with a study on COVID-19, which I thought was the most convincing part.
This was the real aha moment for me. They wanted to see if iKraph could have helped in the early days of the pandemic. So they fed it data only from March to June 2020.
So no cheating with future knowledge?
Exactly. And just with that early data, iKraph flagged about 1,200 candidate drugs. Now, in drug discovery, a 1% hit rate is like a miracle.
So what did iKraph get?
1/3. 1/3 of the drugs that identified in those first 2 months were later validated by actual clinical trials.
Wait, 1/3? That's absurdly high.
It's unprecedented. Take a compound like genistein. It's found in soy. Most people wouldn't think to look there for a viral cure.
I certainly wouldn't.
But the graphs show that genistein interacted with 25 different genes related to COVID, turning off the bad ones and turning on the good ones. It saw the mechanism.
There was another stat that blew my mind about cystic fibrosis.
Yeah, and this really shows the tragedy of unstructured data. They showed that since the 1990s, iKraph could have identified 50 potential drugs every year. And the median lead time, the gap between when the AI found it and when a human actually did, was 9.4 years.
You're telling me the AI knew about these drugs almost a decade before we did?
Effectively, yes. The knowledge was right there, but it was unconnected. They think a tool like this could cut that 9-year wait down to maybe 2 years.
That's 7 years of suffering saved. That is incredible, but okay, there's a catch, right? iKraph can tell you that a connection exists, but not necessarily why.
Correct. It gives you the link, not the derivation. And that brings us to the next breakthrough, which deals with what they call the dark matter of knowledge.
Okay, I love this term. It sounds like we're in an astronomy class. What is dark matter in a textbook?
It's such a great metaphor. I mean, think about how you learned physics. The textbook gives you the final formula, like EMC That's the visible matter. It's what you memorize.
But all the work to get there is missing.
Exactly. The failed attempts, the logical steps, the why. That's the dark matter. And textbooks, Wikipedia, they compress all of that to save space.
And since our current AIs are trained on the internet, they're only seeing that visible stuff.
They're dark matter blind. That's a big reason why they hallucinate. They know the destination, but they have to guess the path to get there because they've never actually seen it.
So SciencePedia is the project trying to fail that, and they use this clever two-agent system, Socrates and Plato.
It fits perfectly, right? Socrates is the questioner. The system takes a big idea, like a theorem, and the Socrates agent just hammers it with questions. Why is this true? How do you get from A to B?
So it's like a genius, relentless toddler.
A reductionist toddler, yeah. It generated about 3 million of these derivation questions. But answering them accurately is the hard part.
Because if the AI answers its own questions wrong, you're just training it on garbage.
Right, so they use what's called cross-model answer validation. They get multiple different AI models to try and solve each question.
So it's like getting a second and a third opinion.
And if they don't all agree on the answer, the system just tosses the whole chain out. It only keeps the logic where they all converge.
Okay, so you build this huge library of verified logic. Then Plato steps in.
Plato is the writer. It takes all that verified dark matter and synthesizes it into an article that a human or another AI can actually learn from.
The example they used with the transmon was so stark. A standard LLM gives you this, very generic Wikipedia-style answer.
It's all surface level. But Plato's explanation, because it had access to the derivation, connected the transmon to things like detecting axion dark matter.
Wait, that's a very specific high-level physics concept.
It is. A standard model would never make that connection because it lives in the dark matter, not the summary. And the result was that Plato cut factual errors by 50%. It's the difference between a parrot reciting a definition and a professor actually explaining the concept.
So, okay, we've structured the data with iKraph to find the what. We've mined the dark matter with SciencePedia to understand the why. But the AI brain itself is still a problem.
And this is the most radical shift of the three. We need to talk about the Hierarchical Reasoning Model, HRM.
This is the David and Goliath story. We have this tiny model, 27 million parameters?
Just 27 million, yes.
And it's going up against giants like Claude 3.7, and the tiny one is winning.
On specific hard reasoning tasks, yes. And to understand why, you have to look at how the big models think. They're based on transformers, which are, well, they're shallow thinkers.
Shallow? What do you mean by that?
They process everything at once, in parallel. Even with chain of thought, where they write out their steps, it's brittle. If it makes one mistake in step 3 of a 10-step problem, the whole thing just collapses. It can't stop and backtrack.
And HRM solves this by acting more like a biological brain.
Exactly. It mimics the difference between System 1 and System 2 thinking.
Right. Daniel Kahneman's idea. System 1 is fast, automatic. System 2 is slow and logical.
And HRM builds that right into its architecture. Has a high-level module, the H module, that's your slow System 2 planner, and a low-level module, the L module, which is the fast System 1 worker.
So how do they work together?
They use something called hierarchical convergence. The H module sets a goal, like solve this part of the maze. Then, and this is the key, it just waits. The L module works on it, computes until it settles on an answer. Then it reports back, and the H module sets the next goal.
So it's like a manager and an engineer. The manager says, fix this bug, and then waits for the report instead of typing every line of code themselves.
That is a perfect analogy. And because of that structure, it just crushes tasks that require planning. Take something like an extreme Sudoku puzzle or a hard maze.
Where you have to backtrack.
Right. Standard LMs failed those tasks completely. 0% accuracy.
Zero. Not like 5%, but literally zero.
Zero. They just kept hallucinating a path through the wall because they couldn't stop and replan.
Wow.
HRM hit 99% accuracy.
Wow. A 27 million parameter model.
It even beat them on the ARC-AGI benchmark for abstract reasoning. It scored over 40%, where Claude 3.7 was at 21%. It's a huge difference.
And you can actually see it. Thinking.
Yeah. The visualizations are eerie. You see it explore a path in a maze, hit a wall, pause, retreat, and then try a new angle. It's navigating the problem, not just predicting the next word.
There was one detail in that study that felt almost spooky, the participation ratio. Break that down for me.
It's a term from neuroscience. It basically measures how rich or complex the brain activity is. In a real brain, the planning areas have a high participation ratio, and the sensory areas have a lower one.
And HRM showed the same pattern.
Mirrored it perfectly.
Yeah.
The high-level module had a high ratio, the low-level had a lower one. But here's the kicker, the thing that keeps me up at night. The researchers didn't program that in.
They did tell it to do that.
No, they just gave it the architecture and the problems. The hierarchy of thought, this separation of fast and slow thinking, it emerged from the training.
That gives me chills.
It suggests that this might be a fundamental law of intelligence, that if you want something to solve complex problems, it has to evolve this kind of structure.
We're watching the physics of thought evolve in real time. So, okay, let's pull all three of these together.
Right. So iKraph showed us we have to structure our data into a graph to find the hidden connections.
Then the content problem.
SciencePedia showed us that to stop hallucinations, we need to expose that dark matter of reasoning, the why.
And finally, the architecture itself.
And HRM proved that brute force isn't enough. We need architectures that think hierarchically, separating the planner from the doer, just like our brains.
It feels like the era of bigger is better for AI might actually be ending.
I think we're moving from just artificial intelligence, which mimics what it's read, to something closer to artificial thought. The fact that this hierarchy emerges on its own, it suggests we're tapping into the underlying physics of how minds actually work.
A massive shift. So while you might not need to solve a 30 by 30 maze today, knowing that the AI of tomorrow is learning to actually pause and think, that changes everything.
It does. And for you listening, next time you read a fact, be a bit like SciencePedia. Don't just accept the visible matter. Ask why. Ask for the derivations. That's where the real understanding is.
Couldn't have said it better. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.